Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome you all. We have today is our last seminar, and we have a very precious guest again today. Kemal Baykali is with us. He has radio background, and from radio until now, today's new media, which is podcasting. He is the founder of radio in at EMU in 1994, and the founder of Island Talks FM, which is trilingual podcast station of Cyprus. He has a very inspiring background. He will be talking about from radio until podcasting. Before giving the floor to him, I would like to read his short biography to give a brief information about him. Kemal Baykallı is a political activist, analyst, and social entrepreneur. He is the founder of Island Talks, the first trilingual podcast station of Cyprus, as well as Unite Cyprus Now, multi-communal grassroots peace and unification movement. While he is a business consultant by profession, he is rather recognized, widely quoted, and interviewed by international media due to his involvement in Cyprus problem-related issues, as well as through his initiatives in bringing social change in Cyprus. Currently, he co-produces Nicosia Uncut, the most listened political podcast in Cyprus, according to Apple Podcast statistics. He also co-produces Garip Zamanlar, a Turkish language podcast, with two of his friends about their life journeys. Garip Zamanlar was voted the podcast of the year in 2021. Thank you, Kemal, for being with us today, and thanks for accepting our invitation. It is our pleasure for hosting you today. So now I'm giving the floor to you.
Thank you, Huri, and thank you, everyone. Friday mornings are not always the best time to concentrate on let's say, on a conference, but we might take a vote among the audience whether we should make it very boring or little boring or just boring. Joking aside, I think, thank you for the introduction as well. I think we are living in really strange times, which is the name of my podcast as well, very different times. The people who remember what was the situation 20 years ago or even 10 years ago will probably be surprised with the pace of the developments in the field of communications, in the field of technology, in the world as a whole. Things that we thought that will never happen has happened. We have experienced a global pandemic, and that was the time actually everybody started listening to or producing a podcast. And I don't want to get into the details, the technical details, but basically podcast was invented quite recently with iPod as a product, one of the Apple products, and broadcasting, bringing together. It's basically an audio file. Somebody records something and people listen to it. And why should people listen to it? Why? What is the difference from the radio? I think the biggest difference is the fact that people choose. It's a choice. Choose to listen whenever they are available, and they choose to listen as much as they want. They can postpone it. They can decide to listen to the podcast if they are taking their dog out, or maybe if they are going for a walk, or if they are driving from work to home. So, according to the statistics, podcasts are most listened, especially in the first half of the day, especially when people are going to work. But, we are in a social department now, and me also being a graduate of a social department, I never thought that I would like the numbers. And I know that many people who are in the field of communications, on politics or sociology, they probably wouldn't like the numbers. But I think it's important to mention that numbers matter. Numbers matter, especially if you're somebody who is trying to make a change in your community. And podcasts are actually a great way to bring change in their communities. Why should we worry about bringing a change in our communities? It's because we want to have a better life for ourselves. It's because there is a constant urge in humanity to change the environment around us. The couples want to change their partners, and with the outcome, they become unhappy. The people, the activists wants to change the world. So everybody wants to change into something which they don't know actually. But going back to our title, to make a change for diversity and inclusion, why is it so important to have a diverse community? It is important because whenever we are actually having the diversity, it means that we have multiple cultures, multiple opinions, and multiple interests. And then when you bring inclusion, when you have them in your communities, when you give them a voice, then you become a more democratic, more easygoing, more understanding, more tolerant society. And this is what we want for ourselves. Rather than constantly thinking about conflicts, rather than fighting for the things that really don't matter, I think it's important to create a community, a world where people listen to each other, understand each other. Well, I don't like the word tolerate because it gives this feeling as if you're tolerating something intolerable. I would rather use the word respect. So, a more respectful world. Talking about the figures and numbers, according to the latest statistics, currently we have around 5 million podcasts that exist globally. 5 million podcasts. According to estimations, probably only maybe 500 of them are really active. Some of them are less active. And so far, 70 million episodes have been produced. It means that close to 500 million people listened to podcasts at least once in their lives. And this number was around 300 millions back in 2019, and it's estimated to pass 500 millions in 2024 next year. We have seen podcasts being produced in more than 150 languages. I think it will not be a surprise that the Americans are the ones who listen the most number of podcasts. And according to the statistics, 78% of the US population are actually aware. They know what the podcast is, or they listened at least once in their lifetime. And the number people listen to them in the morning, and they use mobile phones. Now, the invention and the development of the mobile phones is actually the reason why we listen to so many podcasts. Because if it were only to our laptops, probably the numbers wouldn't be here. Probably the podcast wouldn't develop. So it's just another example how a single development leads to another development in other areas of life. It's not only US, like some countries like Chile, Argentina, like the development reaches to 80%. It means that in developing countries, it's becoming very popular as well. And there is also a big market to it. They are making a lot of money out of this, in especially developed countries. We have $23.5 billion in this industry. So just to give a little bit of why I'm giving you this, because it is important to understand what you're dealing with. I think it's important to understand when you are into it, you understand the strength of it, the power of it. And so we know that an ideal podcast duration is around 20 to 40 minutes, which means that if you make it very long, people will be bored. If you make it very short, maybe you won't have enough time to pass your message. And last but not least, the podcast listeners. I think this is very important as somebody who wants to bring change in the community. It's important to understand this. The podcast listeners are coming from mid-high income members of the communities. they generally have higher education, they are socially active, they are the opinion makers, and they are the decision makers. Now, why do you think that the podcast is an alternative to the mainstream media? What is the point of having podcasts if we are having television and the newspapers?
Let's ask this to the class.
Well, if anybody wants to contribute. Why do you think it's important to, let's say that you are a minority group, or let's say that you are a political group who wants to raise your voice, if you think that your ideas are not represented in the main media, why do you think it's important to go to the podcasts or alternative media? Any opinions? Yes, yes.
As you said, like the podcasts are usually listened by the mid-high income, high educated or decent educated people. So when you go to podcast, is there a chance that you are trying to reach out to those people that will understand the problem or the thing that you're going to?
Very good answer. For those who couldn't hear what the answer was, our friend suggested that it's because the podcast addressed to an elite, if I may, creme de la creme of the community. I mean, it's very elitist way of saying, but basically the decision makers, the people who has the money, people who are active in the community, which is actually an answer. Then let's say continue with this conversation with another question. As our topic is diversity and democratic inclusion, how can we make it with podcasts? How can we reach out to the people in the villages who have no access to internet, who do not have the understanding of the technology, who maybe have the mobile phones but maybe do not use them efficiently? How can we use the alternative media to those who do not have access to what we offer? How can we change them? It's a difficult question. So let me try to answer this. You cannot reach them. The simple answer is that if there is somebody who is living in the rural areas who do not have access to internet, you wouldn't reach them. But what you can do through alternative media and podcasts particularly is that you can reach to people who reach to the other people. The people who will be on the mainstream media, the people who will be reaching out to those whom you cannot reach, will be spreading your ideas. So if you turn the people who are making the decisions, who have the money, who have the access, who can change other people, then you can have the access. Which will bring us to our third point. How are we going to choose our target? Can we try to reach everybody and anybody? You can. But if you don't specify a target group in your mind, not only in podcasts, in any work you do, in business, in politics, you need to specify a target. And if you don't decide a target group, then your message actually goes through the cracks of the life. There's so much noise in the world, so much posting, so much advertisement, so much broadcasting, so much anything and everything. These will be lost. So you need to specify what your target group is. If you are a minority, if you are a social group, if you have something that you want to change, and if you think that it's going to be beneficial for the whole community, then you need to decide either you are going to address to those who are interested in your message, or are you going to address to those who have the potential to listen to you, 3, or are you going to address to those who have no idea about your ideas and work? So now you are faced with a choice. I am asking all of you, You want to change the community. You have an idea. You have a social project. Are you going to reach out to those who listens to you, who knows you, knows your topic? Are you going to reach out to has the potential to reach to you, or those who have no idea? Which one would you choose first? Any suggestion?
Those who listen to you.
Those who listen to you, but aren't they already converted? Why are you trying to preach the converted?
True.
But your answer is true, by the way.
Thank you.
The reason why I said this is this. When you are choosing a target group for a social message, first, you need to enhance your own base. You need to be known by your own people first. The people who are sensitive to your cause, people who share the same values with you. If they don't know you, how are you going to reach out to them? So your first, let's say that you believe in human rights and you want to defend human rights. Or specifically, maybe you believe in LGBTQI rights and you want to raise awareness. First, you need to reach out to your own community. Then, once you fill out that cup, the spillover effect will be the ones who has the potential allies. The ones who are not maybe aware, very much aware of the things that you're promoting, but they are coming from a similar area. So then you reach out. What about those who have no idea what you're up to? Forget them. Don't waste your time and energy. If you want to promote an idea, a social change, if you want to defend a political position, you cannot reach out to those who have no idea or who are against you in the first place. You need to make it in stages. Okay. The other thing I think we need to talk is, let's say that you know that the statistics are on your side. However, because there is a democratic deficit, as we all experience in our lives, we all experience in our world. Think about the political developments in your countries, in the world. You feel that people are in favor of you, but there is a democratic deficit. It's not turning into democracy, and this is why actually we started the Iron Talks. I just wanted to give you the example of the Iron Talks with the example from Cyprus. You are all aware of the Cyprus problem. We are not getting into the Cyprus problem now, but I'll give you as a case study so that you will have a better understanding how we are using podcasts to create awareness of the Cyprus problem. According to the studies made by University of Cyprus, University of Kent, Kiel, and Oxford jointly in the last 8 years, constantly I think, they asked to the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots what kind of a solution they want for the Cyprus problem. This is just an academic work. And historically and traditionally, the Greek Cypriot community tends to go for a unitary state solution where they will have more control as they are the bigger portion of the population. And historically, especially after 74, the Turkish Cypriots go for a two-state solution if it's possible, where they can have their own autonomy. So how can you bring these things together? It's another discussion, but according to the statistics, it's very interesting. The number of Greek Cypriots who reject a two-state solution reach up to 80%. 80. So if you want to find a negotiated solution, it is obvious that one of the sides will not agree to. And the Turkish Cypriots, up to 60, sometimes 70% of the Turkish Cypriots will reject a unitary state solution. But according to the findings, it's very interesting. The second best option of both communities, which is a federal solution, the number of people who say yes or they can tolerate, now I can use the word tolerate, where they can tolerate to a federal solution, in the Greek Cypriot community reached 85% in favor, and in the Turkish Cypriot community, 71% in favor of tolerance. So there is a possibility there. And we were thinking that the leaders in the last 10 years have been elected with the promise of bringing a solution. However, when we look at the result, it never comes because the actions are not in line with what they promised to their voters. So I want to go away from the Cyprus problem now. There is a problem. People vote for their leaders based on what they promise. However, the leaders are not accountable to the people with their promises. And it is every right as you, as voters, as people, to ask why this is not happening. You promised me something, yet you are giving me something else. And this is why we realized that media on both parts of the divide are actually being influenced, are owned by certain interest groups. And this is why alternative media and the podcasts and alternative voices are important for you to challenge the interest groups which run or control the mainstream media. And this is why we decided to set up the Iron Talks. Currently, Iron Talks is basically a platform. So we currently host 8 shows. It started with 4. It's trilingual. Some of the podcasts are in English, some in Turkish, some in Greek. And currently we host 8 shows. And recently we ran a project and we invited vulnerable groups to apply so that we can give voice to them. So we are going to launch, we are right on the verge of launching new podcasts on the channel because we want to give voice to those voices which are not heard in Cyprus. And the good thing about the platform, it's basically a platform, but each and every podcast can be listened on all podcast platforms, including Spotify. So, for example, if you are interested about the Cyprus problem and find out about the Nicosia Anchor, you just go to your Spotify, search for it, and then you can actually listen to it. And just to give you a brief introduction, always make your podcast start very interesting, and make sure that you give a very basic essence of the episode in the beginning. Maybe I don't know if we can hear it here, but just give it.
Welcome to Nicosia Anchor. Used and presented by Andromakis Apopleou and Kemal Baitali.
Now that the elections in Greece and Turkey are over, we elaborated the risks.
And discuss developments at home or lack thereof regarding the Cyprus problem.
Welcome to Nicosia Anchor. Hello, Andromakis.
Hello, Kemal.
A lot has happened since our last program. The reason I gave you as an example is because when you are doing a podcast, when you are doing a YouTube video, when you are doing something that you want to reach out to people, never make it boring. Don't start with cliche. If you want to underline the human rights, don't say, oh, human rights are important, oh, human rights, the first human rights convention was signed, oh, we need to, no, it's boring, you lost the people. If you want to make it interesting with facts, statistics. Ask yourself, what is the value that you give to the community? Anything and everything in life that you offer needs to have a value. If you don't offer a value, if you are repeating what other people have been doing, you can only be a carbon copy. You're not going to make a change. Each and every time, if you set up a business, if you want to start a TV career, if you want to start a YouTube video, always ask yourself, what is the value that you offer? And this brings us to social entrepreneurship, and I'm going to close up. I'm going to conclude. The question is this. If you know that you are bringing a value to a community, how can you make it popular? The answer is not simple, but you need to constantly ask this yourself. Use social media, but when you are using social media, don't post a lie. Don't. People are posting one-liners, people are posting links, it's boring. Use creative solutions. Nowadays we have artificial intelligence, we have Canva, we have professional tools, but you don't have to be professionals. But at the end of the day, if you bring value to something, eventually it will make money as well. But money should not be your ultimate goal. You need to focus on the value that you're bringing to the community. And if you're bringing value to the community, people listen to you as well. If people listen to you, your voices are being heard. If your voices are being heard, you live in a more democratic, more inclusive, and more diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't, I couldn't find a question to ask you. Actually, you mentioned lots of things about podcast, but of course, I'm going to ask a question. You talk about the tips of making a podcast interesting, yes, but the important thing that I find with this Island Talks FM is it is voluntarily. You are volunteers in doing this podcast. I would like to ask, what are the difficulties that you are facing? It's been 3 years that you published this website, podcast station, and what inspired you actually, apart from Cyprus issue? And it takes time, it takes energy, and you are doing it as voluntarily. So what inspired you and what are the difficulties that you are facing?
What inspired me is the same with what everybody is inspired of when they're actually making podcasts. Different from the televisions or printing a newspaper, podcasts are easy to make, cheap or sometimes no cost, and easy to promote thanks to social media. I know that you were expecting some kind of a noble answer from me, but the reality is this. It's practical, and that's the strength for the civil society groups, for people who has ideas about their agendas. Okay? So it is easily accessible. Anybody can open an account in Spotify and they can start their podcast. What do you need to start a podcast? Basically, you need to record your voice. How can I record my voice? I can record it here right away, right now. I can start talking onto my phone. It's an audio file. Then I can post it on a podcast platform. Boom, it's there. But consistency requires commitment. And commitment comes with something that burns inside you.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything that burns inside you, if you don't want to continue working on it, then it can become an obstacle. It becomes a responsibility. It becomes boring. I know many people who start with, it's going to be great, so much fun. I'm going to start my own podcast after the second episode. They're like, I'm so tired. I have other things to do. I hate this class that I'm taking at the university. So much responsibility. The exams are coming, and I have to study. She or he brings boring guests and then wants us to take notes. I don't want to spend time for my podcast. Or a blog, or a YouTube blog, right? So it needs to burn inside you. You need to know what you want to do, and you need people to support you as well. At the particular case of Island Talks, you don't need actually a lot of things. You can learn everything. So I learned on YouTube how to design a website. So what you see here, I designed it by myself. I learned everything from scratch on YouTube. Nowadays, YouTube has everything. I advise you to use it. And I learned how to record a podcast on YouTube. I learned how to post the podcast and host the podcast on YouTube. And also by experience, by making mistakes. Don't worry about making mistakes. And also, I would ask you to now, everybody who listens to me, to if you're using Instagram, please go to Island Talks Cyprus page on Instagram and check if there is something interesting for you. Now you can do this. If you're using Facebook page or Twitter, you can also search for us. I'm sure there is something interesting for you as well, where you feel like, oh, this is something that I want to discuss. And using social media also helps us a lot. And it's important that when you invite a guest, they also advertise for you. This is also a good way of reaching out to other people that you don't traditionally reach out. So the answer is that yes, it is a challenge, but everything in life is a challenge. For things that will bring value, you need to put some effort. Unless it's a lottery ticket, things do not come easily.
Thank you for the answer. Do you have any question? Because if you don't have, I will continue for my questions. Any question? No. Okay. What do you think about the contribution that you are making by doing Nicosia Uncut, for example? Because Nicosia Uncut is about political analysis, about the both sides of the Cyprus, and sometimes, the issues going around in the world. What kind of contribution? How do you contribute, for example, when it comes to Cyprus issue?
When we started, not many people were aware of what we were doing. So when you start, you have to understand that you will not reach to millions immediately. Basically, in this particular case of Nicosia Uncut, I want to show you something here. We started slowly, and then what we realized that because it's an English language podcast by a Greek Cypriot and a Turkish Cypriot, many people who are interested in Cyprus problems, such as the diplomats on the island, started to listen to us. So sometimes you choose the target, sometimes targets choose you. And that was the success of United Cyprus, the island, Nicosia Uncut in Island Talks. And I'm trying to show you something. As you can see, we are using social media very efficiently. This is the chartable statistics, which is made for the entire island, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots together. There is a political section, and it shows the charts. When we finally reached out to number one, the most listened to political podcast of Cyprus, people start making their own advertisement for you. You don't have to do it anymore. But for this, you need commitment, you need consistency. You cannot do one podcast and then wait for 2 months and do another podcast. You need to be relevant. You need to give value. And this is what we learned from Island Talks. So when we reach out to the internationals actually also means the press. An international press also reach out to us. And by this, you start creating your own influence. And then people who are interested in the Cyprus program started to know you. Then people who have the potential to know about the Cyprus program started to know you. And eventually, you might even reach out to those who have no idea about what you're doing.
Any question?
have one.
I have lots of questions, but
Okay. My question is that, okay, you talk about lots of advantages of podcasting, and it can be seen as one of the democratic way of reaching other people. What are the negative aspects of this?
Your time,
Mhm.
you start thinking that maybe it doesn't worth the hassle. After you realize that your first episode has only been listened by 20 people, most of them are your friends. They're just being kind to you. Because you are so excited with your podcast, you go up and tell everyone that they do listen. And you are so excited for the second episode. Guess how many people listen to your second episode? 8. 8. Probably half of them stopped listening after the second. So there is no guarantee that you are going to reach as many as people as possible in the first, let's say, 10 episodes. That's one of the downsides. 2, there is so much competition. If you find a niche area, that's good. But probably if you are talking about relationships, if you're talking about, it can be, you can see that everybody's doing it. The good thing about podcasts on this part of the world, it is still at an evolving stage, so you can actually take the lead. If you have an idea, either of you have a podcast idea, if you think that there is a star hiding behind this inside your body and you want to do it, maybe you should try. Maybe something that you think that will be interesting will become. This is now the time. And I think the biggest downside is this. Other than this, you record your voice and send it out. I don't.
How about spreading the different values? Because one of the points that you mentioned is that in podcasting we can reach a variety of opinions, which is good and bad. I would like to hear more about the negative aspect of this, if it's possible.
Like everywhere in the world, we have bigots, we have people who are prejudiced, we have people, the religious fundamentalists, we have people who support Trump, we have people who, let's say that all the values that you defend are wrong. So there are those people there as well. And this is why it's also important that you need to be there to exist. Otherwise, just like everything in the world, those platforms will also be occupied by others. So the values, this is just a tool. This is just a channel. The values evolve with you. You need to own your own values. You need to promote them. But making a propaganda out of the values will get you out to a point. You need to explain why those values are good for the community. What value do you bring with your values? Why is it important to have a diverse community? Why is it important to have women more involved in politics? Why is it important to have a gender equality in decision making? Why is it important to respect people's sexual orientation? Why? Other than it sounds good, why? What value do you bring? The diversity that it brings, the richness, the democratic freedom that it brings, the respect that it brings. You need to promote your values. Podcasts, televisions, radio, they're just the tools. You need to explain and show the value. And this is true for politics as well. In your countries, in our countries, if the political parties that we support are not doing well, then you have to think, why? What value do they offer? What value can they promote? Why they are not explaining the values that they are promoting? So these are the things that I think we need to focus on.
Any question? Actually, you made lots of suggestions. My last question was about the suggestions that you want to make for our students. But, okay, I want to ask this question actually, and then maybe we'll finish. As I said before, you have a radio background as well. In 1994, you were one of the founders of radio in EMU Radio at Eastern Mediterranean University. I would like to ask you about the differences actually. Of course, there are lots of differences, but I want you to mention about what kind of obstacles you face, what were the difficulties in those times, because um, we are living in a world now which the technology is flying actually. Even now we are sitting here and somebody is inventing something from somewhere, in somewhere. Therefore, everything is very easy. As you said, you learn everything from YouTube and how you host, how you record, or technical processes about podcasting. But it wasn't like that in the past, like in 1994. Therefore, I would like to ask you about what kind of obstacles that you were facing in those times and what are the differences, what you suggest to our students, because everything is very easy now when we compare it to the past.
I don't want to bore people with the historical development of radio, but what I can tell you is that these days, if you want to come up with a new idea, a new way, you just don't need to start everything from scratch. You have the tools and the potentials, everything under your hands. You just need to connect, make those things. You bring laptops, you bring recording, you bring social media, and then boom, you have a podcast channel, right? You don't have to do it from scratch. But of course, back in times in '94, when I was just 2 years old, of course,
I was 4.
and it was a campus radio, and that's also other thing. Some of you, I don't know, maybe all of you are studying communications, but then you have those people who are coming up with a radio with another background, right? Like me, I studied international relations, but we have all kind of politicians who are coming from engineering. These days, do not think in terms of what I studied, what I'm going to do. But those days, I think the difficulty is that there was no private radio in Turkey and in northern Cyprus. So we had to start with a special, let's say, permission by the authorities. We didn't have the law at the time. There was no broadcasting law. We had to go into one of the rooms in the campus and then put sponges all over the walls, and use old techniques to start broadcasting. At that time, we were only broadcasting in the Famagusta area. We were so excited at that time. We felt like we are going to do radio show for sit there and do 10 hours. We were thinking that if I'm upset, I'll sit down and then I'm going to talk about my problems and start, give secret message to my ex-boyfriend as if they're going. Those things in social media, you hear it all the time. Like, if you were a real person, you wouldn't be doing this. So that wasn't the case. We wanted to turn the campus radio into a place where all university students and groups coming from different nationalities are being heard. And that was the motivation was that we were interested in the technology of it. We were interested to be in front of the microphone without thinking what was going to come after, being honest. And then you started to evolve, you started to learn, and that's how it happened. And of course, the private radio stations started to come up and people started to listen. But at the time, I remember, to finish it with a real story, let's say that in the summertime, we didn't have so many people doing the radio shows because many of our students were going back to Turkey or to their countries. I remember going there like 9 o'clock in the morning and doing a program until, let's say, 12. And I needed to go back home, and I didn't have the car. So I was telling, so if you see somebody hitchhiking in front of this cafe, it will be me, please take me. And it happened a few times that they listened to my program. And they said, oh, I was listening to the program, and they gave me a lift. So that's how things work.
I have the last question.
Yes, of course.
So you also mentioned that one development resulted in another development. So I was wondering, what do you think the podcasting could do? You know, the development that could cause from podcasting. What do
According
you
to the
think about it?
statistics, more and more people are listening to podcasts on YouTube. Although it is not in line with the philosophy of podcasts, because people are listening to podcasts when they're driving, for example. People these days are choosing to see you actually recording it in the studio. So probably it will evolve into multiple things. You produce something, they will take the voice out, they will use it as a podcast, they will make a video, they will put it on YouTube, they will make a short clip out of it, they will put it on Instagram stories, and they will just maybe do something. And so they will be diversifying the product. Probably it's going towards this direction. We know that also there's a lot of discussion whether the podcasts are dying. This is the US I'm talking about, because in the COVID times, everybody was at their homes talking to their microphones, listening to and producing podcasts. But when you go to the basics, it's an audio file. People will continue to listen. They have 5 senses. Listening to is just one, and they will continue to listen. Some people, some podcasts are actually turning their discussions into script so that people can read. Not everybody can listen. Some people can read. So there are multiple ways of getting it, but I think we will continue to see. Maybe it will be easier to produce, maybe it will be easier to host, but eventually the basics will be the same. And humans are the same. Their values, their needs, their interests, their instincts, some of them are basic, some of them are not, will continue to be the same. And then will be continue to be addressing those with those channels.
Would you please correct me if I'm mistaken? What you said, you mentioned that although the nature of the podcasting is based on hearing, right now they emphasize on the visual part of it based on YouTube things, yes?
YouTube is these days, it's very interesting. YouTube is one of the channels that people use to search things. Now, like we have this terminology, Google it.
Yes.
People are actually doing it on YouTube.
YouTube it.
So, so basically, this is why many of the podcasts are also present.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other question? Okay, thank you so much, Kemal, for again accepting our invitation and being with us today. It is our pleasure for hosting you actually, and thank you for this valuable conversation, the seminar, and information that you shared with us. Before we conclude, I would like to just mention the important thing that, as you mentioned about podcasts, is actually to make it short, not too long, because we are now getting bored from everything. That's why Reels are very popular now, because they are, include the information which mention just to the point. Therefore, yes, thank you again for coming and being with us today. And this is our last seminar for this semester. Yes, I think we are going to be together next year with different guests, with different valuable guests. So I want to finish this program again like a TV programmer, but we are going to meet next year. So see you next year, and please take care of yourself until 2024.